And you got to get rid of these people. Give me a shot. You will have a safe New York within 3 months. 3 months.
What is up, people of the internet? It is me, Real American, back again with a new video. And today we have to talk about the 2024 presidential election because Donald Trump is officially making a play for the deep blue state of New York. Yeah, that's right. Not Pennsylvania, not Michigan, not Wisconsin. He wants to flip the state of New York, or at the bare minimum, make a serious play for it. And I know that sounds crazy because, well, back in 2020, Biden won the state by over 23 points. So, on paper, it seems like an absolutely crazy idea to even consider New York. Like, you're talking about a state that you have to swing by over 24 points just to barely win. So on paper, it sounds crazy for Trump to say, hey, we are going to make a serious play for the state of New York, which, like I said, hasn't voted Republican in like 40 years. And even then, in 2020, it voted for Joe by over 24 points. So it sounds crazy for Trump to be saying, we're going to invest time and resources into the state of New York. But then you realize quickly that, wait a minute, this may not be a crazy idea after all. Now, I'm not saying Trump's going to win New York. I still think that, at the bare minimum, Harris wins the state of New York by double digits, like by 10 points at the bare minimum. But when you think about it, Trump actually putting time and money into New York, and I'm not talking about spending $500 million on the state. I'm talking about spending a couple million here, a couple million there, and maybe you could hit the media markets in Pennsylvania as well, which we all know Pennsylvania is an actual swing state. But the reason I say that is, for starters, it's quite apparent that in recent years, New York has had a shift to the right. Now, like I said, back in 2020, Biden won the state by over 23 points. That's quite a bit. It's one of the most Democrat states in the country. But then something happened in 2022 that took everyone by surprise. Lee Zeldin, a Republican, nearly shocked the world as he came within 7 points of winning the governorship. Yeah, in the state of New York. Now, of course, in 2022, it was a midterm, it was a Republican cycle, and of course, it's a gubernatorial election. So you can't necessarily compare it to a presidential race. I'm not saying it's going to swing 16 points Republican like it did back in 2022. But it seems like the trends we saw back in 22 and even in 21 and 23, it seems like some of that, at the bare minimum, has stayed. Look at this poll from Siena Research, which is the gold standard in the state of New York. Right now, they found it Harris plus 13. Yeah, Harris plus 13. That's a 10-point shift from 2020. If that happens in any other state, like Virginia, that would flip the state. If that happens in Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, they would all be safe Republican states. That's a 10-point shift, and people aren't talking about this poll enough. Now, of course, a couple months ago when Biden was still in the race, we were kind of discussing the idea that maybe Trump could pull off an upset, maybe it could be within 5 points. But after Harris became the Democrat nominee, everyone thought that, well, New York's going to shift Republican, but not by 10 points. Well, Siena Research, which, by the way, this poll actually overstated Democrats in their sample by quite a bit. They found Harris up by 13 in New York. This is post-debate, this is post-convention, post-everything. Yet the best pollster in the state of New York found Harris up by only 13. And those undecideds, you look at who's actually undecided, they lean to the right. Guys, there's a possibility that Trump could actually come within 10 points in the state of New York, which is a 15-point shift from 2020. That's a big deal because if he's doing better in New York, what do you think's happening in New Jersey? What do you think's happening in Pennsylvania? And I know Pennsylvania is not the same state as New York and New Jersey, but there are some demographics that If Trump's doing way better in New York, for example, he's going to do better in Pennsylvania. Not every demographic's the same, but there are some similar demographics in both states. That's why this is a big deal, because if Trump is doing way better in New York, way better in New Jersey, what do you think's happening in Pennsylvania? Well, what do you think's happening in Georgia, Virginia, Arizona? That's why this is a big deal. That's why if Trump is really within 10 points in New York, it really makes you wonder what's happening everywhere else. Because a 10-point shift in New York is not a small swing. It's not a 2-point shift. We're talking about a 10-point swing in the state of New York. And you're going to tell me with a straight face that that's going to have absolutely zero correlation with any other state. Really? Do people actually believe that? Now, I'm not saying that Trump's going to win New York. I'm not saying that for sure it's going to be within 10 points. But this poll from Siena Research suggests that there's a possibility that, yeah, it could be within 10 points. And there's a bunch of reasons why this is a big deal. Like I said, if Trump is doing way better in New York, New Jersey, again, when I say New York, you would assume that even New Jersey would have a big shift to the right. What do you think's happening in Pennsylvania? What do you think's happening everywhere else? And I know New York's not the same thing as other states, but you're telling me that New York's going to be the only state that shifts Republican. I don't believe that. If New York's having such a big shift to the right, you would see shifts in other states. Not as big as New York. I'm not saying we're going to see a 10-point shift in Wisconsin, but is it really crazy to say that if Trump is doing 10 points better in New York, he's doing like 3 points better in Pennsylvania, 3 points better in Wisconsin, 4 points better in Michigan, etc.? Is it really that big of a surprise or that big of a conspiracy to say that? I don't think so, because like I said, there are demographics in New York that Trump would have to be doing way better with in order for it to swing 10 points Republican. And those same demographics are in Pennsylvania, are in Michigan, Wisconsin. I know they're different states, but like I said, you cannot tell me that one state's gonna have such a big shift to the right, but the entire country stays the exact same. Especially if it's New York. If this was like Wyoming, that's one thing. But New York? I highly doubt you're going to see a swing of 10 points or more in New York, but see absolutely nothing happen in Pennsylvania, nothing happen in Georgia, nothing happen in Arizona, Virginia, North Carolina. I would just assume that every state but New York shifts Democrat. That's how some people really, that's what people believe. They actually believe this idea that only New York is going to have a shift to the right. Now, I'm not denying that you will see a big shift to the right in New York, especially compared to other states. That's because there's a bunch of issues in New York that other states are not really dealing with. Like, of course, people are dealing with crime, immigration, cost of living, and the economy. Every state's dealing with that. But the state of New York in particular is getting hammered on everything. They're dealing with bad crime. They have a crisis with immigration. They have a crisis with cost of living. Everything is amplified in New York. So that's why you probably will see a big shift in New York, especially compared to every other state. And that's a big deal because if Republicans continue to surge in New York, that helps them with the House, which I would argue is the biggest reason why you want to spend time and money on the state. Not because you're going to win the state, but not only could you make the race a lot closer and force Democrats to spend money to defend New York, which they may not, but the impact of actually investing in New York is the fact that you could win the House through the state of New York. Hell, you actually have to hold on to a couple seats in New York if you want to keep the House. And that may be the reason why the Trump campaign, they're spending time and money on the state of New York, because they realized, oh, wait a minute. If we want to have a House majority, we need people like Mark Molinaro and Michael Lawler to win. Because if they don't, we have a pathway to a House majority, but it becomes a lot more difficult. If they win and they hold on to a couple other seats, they hold on to the House, more than likely. And that's probably the reason that they're investing a bunch of time and money into the state. If they win these House races, they keep the House, more than likely. And Trump could actually pass policy that he wants to pass. Not just, oh, the Democrats have a House majority and he can't do anything for 4 years. No, if he has a House majority, he can pass stuff that he wants to actually get through, especially in the first 2 years of his second term. And that's why I could see this being a big deal that Trump is doing 10 points better in New York, 15 points better, because if you're talking about a 10 to 15 point shift, you're talking about a lot of House races in New York being a lot more competitive than they should be. Now, I know some people are going to say, but there's no way Trump's actually going to do way better in New York. Maybe he's only down by 13 right now, but come November, he's going to lose by like 20 points. Some people are going to argue that, which I guess it's a possibility that by some miracle, Kamala Harris wins over the undecideds and wins back a bunch of voters that are voting for Trump, but they're Democrats. I guess that's a possibility. But there's a brand new scandal that I think kind of throws everything into question. For those that don't know, there is a real bad corruption scandal in the city of New York. It is bad, and it's actually not even related to the ongoing federal investigations around Eric Adams, who's a Democrat mayor. And that's why I believe the Trump campaign, out of the blue, like, this is the first time in like 3 months they did a rally in New York. They realized that this scandal in New York is real bad for Democrats. It is bad because the mayor is a Democrat and he's involved in a big scandal. There's a bunch of other city officials that are involved in a corruption scandal. It is bad for Democrats. And I think the Trump campaign realized, oh, wait a minute. This is a brand new scandal that we could hit on right away, and that could possibly help us in the state of New York. We may not win New York, but maybe something crazy happens where when this story broke, maybe our numbers went up by 10 points. And out of the blue, New York could be way more competitive than it should be. Again, I'm not saying it's going to happen, but it is a possibility that if this scandal keeps getting worse for Democrats, which it seems like every day, the more that comes out related to this scandal, the worse it gets. And there's other stuff with Eric Adams that's not even related to this corruption scam. It is real bad. But we got to see what happens. But if Democrats are dealing with this now, they could be in a lot more trouble than they think because, well, if New York's really within 10 points, which I'm not saying that's going to happen, but if the Trump campaign makes a play for it and they invest time and money into the state, and that helps them even by a couple of points, if New York's really within 10 points, the Harris campaign would have to be forced to spend something here. Because can you imagine a scenario where they win North Carolina, but by some miracle they lose New York, for example? Which that's not going to happen, but who knows? Maybe something crazy happens in the next 2 months where Trump goes up by 15 points. The same thing happened with Zeldin. He was down by roughly 15 points at the same time. But then, in the last month of the election, he surged. And it was too late for him, but if he surged just a couple weeks prior, there's a good chance that Lee Zeldin would have won this race. Who knows what happens? I'm not saying it's going to happen again, but there's a possibility that in the month of October, we could see New York have a sudden surge for Trump. We just got to see what happens. It may not happen. I'm not saying it's for sure going to happen, but when you look at these polls, they do look pretty good for Trump, and now you factor in these new scandals, it's possible. Something crazy could happen, and out of the blue, New York's within 10 again, like it was just a couple months ago. Anyways, folks, thank you so much for watching. If you guys did enjoy this video, smash the like button down below, subscribe, share with your friends, hit that little bell, follow the social media accounts in the description down below, and of course, join the channel today. Godspeed to all of you.